Welcome back, everybody. So, you may know, you may not know, I don't know what you do know, but a couple weeks ago, WATA released their initial POP reports, which is what we're gonna go ahead and analyze today. So, very first thing we're gonna look at, and probably what a lot of you are here to see, what are the POP 0 NES games? So, on this list that WATA published, they do not show which games have not been graded. So, in order to find the games that they have not graded, I cross-referenced with my own NES master list. Now, my master list might also be missing some things, so don't take it as a concrete, this is definitive type thing, but I'm pretty damn confident with it. So without further ado, let me go ahead and lift up the blur and we can look at what are the POP 0 NES games. So here they are on the left side of the screen. These are games that WATA has not graded yet. Right here, these are games that they will never grade. Well, they might grade them at some point, but at this point in time, they can't grade them. This is big box, big box, big box, big box, and weird size box. So we'll never see these on the POP report, at least for the foreseeable future. On the left side here, these 20 games are actual sized games that WATA can grade that they haven't graded yet. So at the top here, these games in green are ones that have been historically rare and or expensive. So these are the ones that WATA has not graded yet, where there's a high correlation of them actually being rare and hard to find in any condition. The ones underneath here that are orange are games that have not been historically expensive or sought after, so the fact that they don't have any graded copies could just be a thing that no one thought it was worth sending them in yet, so no one did send them in yet. So now that there's some attention drawn to them, we can see how many come out of the woodwork and we can see the actual rarity of the items. When items are worthless and or not sought after, it's near impossible to gauge the actual rarity of them. Supply simply doesn't come out because it's not worth anyone's time. No one's thinking about them. Now that there's attention to them, we'll see how many come out and we'll have a much better gauge of them 1 year from now. I have no faith that a game like Battle Tank is going to remain lower on the POP report than some other very hard to find games. Games that have not been worth sending in are not the same as games that are rare and simply didn't have many sent in. So make sure you keep that in mind when you're reading the POP report. And underneath those, we have 9 unlicensed games. Now, again, this is super hard to gauge their actual rarity. Unlicensed in general has never been as popular as licensed collecting. Puzzle, Crazy Creatures, Double Strike. I wouldn't think that these games here are incredibly rare. There's very likely some floating around out there, but when we get into Bubble Bath Babes and Peekaboo Poker, obviously those ones are also extremely expensive and are going to be nigh impossible to find a sealed one in any condition. Some of them have decent value, like Death Race and Ultimate League Soccer here both do have decent value, as well as Mermaids of Atlantis. I have to assume that these games are going to have low population factory sealed, but until more people care about it and are thinking about it and we get an actual flush of the supply to market, it's really hard to gauge. But it is at least worth noting which games have not come up yet, even for the unlicensed ones. Put in the comment section below if you have one of these games, because I would love to know if some of you guys have any of these factory sealed. So now we move into an overview of the POP reports. So these are all of the totals of every game graded in each condition, and underneath here is the percentage of the total games graded by grade. And just looking at the color scale here, you can see that the bulk is concentrated between 9 and 9.6, which is pretty insane to look at right now. And what you can see here also is that the average of all the games that have been graded so far is an 8.76. Now that does count the less than 6.5s at 6.0. Given that it only makes up 3.43% of the total data, even if you were to reduce that to a 1 or a 2, you'd only be taking off 0.2%. So call it an 8.5 to an 8.76 right now, being your average game that has been graded, which is insanely high right now and does not reflect reality of finding factory sealed games. If you've been collecting for a while, if you've been hunting sealed games for a while, you know that the average game you find on eBay, in the wild, wherever, is not going to be 8.5 to 9.0 condition. That's pretty damn high. You're far more likely to find a random sealed game in the 7 to 8 range. So just to give you guys another visual of this, here's the distribution of WATA grade on a bar chart. And if we take from the 9.0 up to the 9.8 and add those percents together, it equals almost 64% of the total distribution of games that have been graded on the NES. So 64% of all the games fall between 9.0 and 9.8. Again, that is insane. So what that information tells us is it could be a few things here. One, the WATA scale is extremely soft. Now, I don't think that's the case It is pretty difficult to get those 9.0s to 9.8s. They are generally pretty damn good, especially in the 9.4 to 9.8 range. So I don't think that's the brute cause here of why we see such a high distribution. So number 2, a lot of the games that are currently graded are coming from factory case packs. Now we do know that there are factory case packs still floating around. We know that some have been cracked and submitted to WATA. This is nothing new. This was going on with VGA as well. Now, do I think the vast majority of games that have been graded came from case packs? I personally don't believe they are. Just going from history and how difficult it is to find case packs of most games, they aren't exactly just floating around out there in high quantity. Which brings in a third thing that is also playing towards this, is that a lot of people took high grade VGA games and swapped them over to WATA. Now, I personally think that this is the highest correlation as to why we see a distribution like this, is people took their VGA 85 plus, 90s, 95s, and pushed them over to WATA in order to both help WATA grow as a company and to take advantage of the high sale prices. A lot of the early adopters of WATA were people who were already using VGA and already into sealed game collecting. So it's not crazy that they would take a large amount of their already graded or already mint games that they'd amassed and put them to WATA immediately. But what this data really does show is that everything that is still being submitted at this time is extremely cherry-picked. This distribution here does not reflect the reality of finding a factory sealed game in 2021. And this is without seal ratings, do keep in mind, so that will also play a factor. But you know that if you just go on eBay, buy a random factory sealed NES game, you're far more likely to fall in the 6.5 to 8.5 range, despite what the data here is showing. So as time passes, as it becomes more worthwhile to send in games, as the backlog gets taken care of, we are going to see a lot more distribution come through at this less than 6.5 up to 8.5 range. That'll probably push the normal distribution to about 7.5. And I believe we'll get there. We might even get a little bit lower in the future, but that is full speculation, so I don't want to dive too deep there. But what this data shows currently, we are nowhere near a point where you simply submit anything. So now just coming over to the actual population report on the WATA website. Let's look at some of the overview stuff again. The most common graded game is Super Mario Bros. 3, which probably doesn't surprise anyone at this point if you've been paying any attention. 237 total copies. Followed by Super Mario Bros. The original, 157. Legend of Zelda, 128. Super Mario Bros. 2, 117. Zelda 2, 106. And Friday the 13th at 105. I assume for most people, Friday the 13th is the most surprising one, but it's very easy to see by looking at the distribution that there have been a lot of case packs cracked. We have 18 9.4s, 29 6s, and 29 8s. When you're looking to see what games are likely coming out of factory case packs, look at all three of these numbers here. Once again, look at Wario's Woods here, right? 13, 11, 21. That is factory case packs. Impossible Mission 2, 13, 14, 19. Factory case packs, without question. When we look at the more common games like Mario 3, I have no doubt that there's also games coming out of case packs, but games like Mario 3 and Mario Bros simply had a ton printed, so there are more factory sealed games just floating around in general for these most popular titles. There is of course going to be a correlation between copies sold and remaining sealed copies that now exist. But as you can see, even on these games with really high population counts where we know that factory cases are being broken, in the 9.6 to 9.8 range, there still isn't that much population to go around. And I mean, maybe some people are going to disagree with that, maybe some people think that is a ton of supply, but let's talk about Mario Bros. 3 sitting at 237. 237 people being interested in factory sealed game collecting, being interested in owning this game, being interested in speculating in this area. Obviously, there's also the VGA pop report that we need to take into consideration, but relatively speaking, versus other collectibles, 237 total pop at this time is pretty damn low. It just is. And if we go to other very popular games like Final Fantasy here, there's 64 of them. Metroid has 60. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, 58. These are some of the most popular games on the console that I think in the future people are going to want to collect, assuming this hobby does grow. Now, if you are on the side where you don't believe this hobby is going to be bigger than it is now, if you believe we entered into a bubble, a euphoric mania, this is the peak of factory sealed game collecting and it's only downhill from here, then sure, you probably do think that these numbers seem inflated, these numbers seem big, but I don't believe there were a lot of people pushing a narrative that these numbers were going to be single digit or anything like that. Metal Gear Solid, another very popular game, sitting at 45. So obviously the one question we can't answer is how many games are going to come from VGA that have to be added to this population report, and due to crossovers, how many games from the VGA pop report are not going to exist anymore because they've been turned into WATA games. Unfortunately, that's something we'll never be able to answer. It's like other hobbies and other pop reports. If something gets cracked, resubmitted, submitted for a different grade or changed grading company, in most instances, both are going to exist on the pop report despite there only being one in existence. In my opinion, like I said earlier, I do think a lot of high-grade VGA games were crossed over to WATA during this mania. I also do believe that in the past 3 years of WATA grading, they've probably graded close to how much VGA had graded in the past 8 to 10 years. Because you have to remember that this was a speculative mania that happened between investors, collectors, and speculators. When VGA was the only primary grading company from, say, 08 to 2015, it was a much more enthusiast, collector-driven market where you didn't have people just submitting anything to VGA in order to flip it. You had some people, of course, there's always going to be, but there was a much more organic market taking place, which meant a lot less volume going to VGA. I never had to deal with backlogs in all of the years I've used VGA. Even at the lowest, slowest tier, I always got it back within the time frame. So that's something to keep in mind, that when the VGA pop reports come, I don't expect the numbers to just overwhelm what we see here on the WATA pop report to the point of, oh my god, every game is common now. I do think that even once we get the VGA numbers, if we just add them directly to the WATA numbers, we're going to be looking at population counts like maybe Mario Bros 3 will go up to 350, 400 copies. Maybe Mario Bros will jump up to 250, 300. Some of these most popular games, they might double. I'll give that. But a lot of this stuff as we go down there, they just don't exist in high quantities, and even historically, they haven't been easy to find. So let's say Ninja Gaiden. Maybe we're going to add another 30 copies. Maybe we're going to add another 20 copies. So now we're talking about a population of 50-ish, 60-ish. It just isn't much to go around. So as of November 11th, the total number of games graded by WATA for NES is about 8,000. So if you think that the total number of 8,000 is really high, you also have to take into effect that there's 800 different games being graded, which of course, if everyone just sends in a few of each title, we're going to have a total that is quite high. Do all games matter? Of course they don't. A lot like how all Pokemon cards don't matter. A lot of sealed games will either lower in price and never recover, or just kind of stay in that 100 to 200 range. They might even fall under 100 in the future. But the games that actually have demand, notoriety, provenance, those are the ones where the pop reports really matter. Those are the ones where we're going to see a lot of them actually come to market, and those are the ones that we need to keep our eyes on. So just to wrap things up, we now have a snapshot of grades sitting at the 1st of November. Once we get the full fluid pop report, which is supposed to come Q1 2022, we'll be able to compare this snapshot to the new numbers. And that will at least give us some gauge of how many are being graded per month of the most popular titles. The backlog is huge right now. There's obviously going to be a lot of games coming out of it, but it's my opinion that we're not going to see a lot of premium NES titles, most popular titles, coming out in the next 6 months. It's going to be lower grade games, it's going to be less popular games, and it's also going to be newer consoles, talking PS2, Wii, stuff like that, that's going to account for more of the backlog than NES. But I'm going to end it there because that's getting heavy into the world of speculation. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the like button. It really helps me out. If you enjoy the content, make sure to subscribe. That even helps me out more. On that note, I'll see you guys next time.